Hey, what is going on, everybody? Scary Spikes back with you again. This time I'm going to be doing a video that I've been meaning to do for quite a little bit of time now. A lot of folks have been asking me to do some tutorial videos on Magic, specifically more how to play Magic in general, not just Magic 2015 here, but thankfully the tutorials and help offered in Magic 2015 is very, very good for new players to get into paper Magic as well. So without further ado, I want to get started here. I'm not sure how long this video is going to take, so if it looks like it's going to take too long, I'm going to try to divide it into some segments, but hopefully we'll get everything covered. Again, this is for new Magic players or players who want to get into Magic, and the first thing that I would suggest for you to do is to download a copy of Magic 2015, and I'll tell you why. Because if you go over to Help and Options here from the main menu, and you go over to these options here, this basically tells you how to play basic Magic. Tells you different parts of a card, all the different types, colors of Magic, as well as other basic information that you need to be able to play Magic effectively at an early stage. Of course, there's a lot more to Magic than this, and a lot of things change, especially if you play in the standard format. Most of the game formats are basically in a constructed setting, which means that you build your deck before you go ahead and play the game. So of course that includes Standard, Modern, Commander, or EDH as it is otherwise known, and of course Legacy, and then there's a bunch of other sort of less popular formats of playing Magic, such as Block, or I guess Extended, which is basically an extended version of Standard. So there's a lot of different formats. Personally, I play in Modern. Standard is a format that a lot of people play in just because it's easy to start playing, but unfortunately it also happens to be the most expensive of the formats, because every so often new cards come out, and the cards that you've been playing with are no longer legal in the Standard format, because it's usually about like the last year and a half worth of cards that have been released. So you're forced to learn new cards, you're forced to buy new cards. Initially, I thought myself that this was a great idea because I get to learn all these different cards coming out, but really it's not so great because I spend a lot of money, and all the time that I spend learning about these new cards, eventually they're obsolete after about a year and a half, as they start to enter more into the Modern format. So with that being said, I want to go over just some very, very quick basics with you. So let's go over into our help and options, and we're just going to go over this very quickly. So parts of a card, this is what a Magic card looks like. All Magic cards look pretty much identical. You've got the artwork here, you've got the name, the mana cost over here, the type of card that it is, as well as the subtype, the rarity. So this symbol is indicative of the set that the card is from, and if the symbol is black, it's a common. If it's silver, it's an uncommon. If it's gold, it's a rare, and if it's orange, it's a mythic rare. So obviously those are the most rare and most powerful of cards the higher you go. Essentially Magic is very easy in the sense that you essentially just do what the card says. So this has flying, which is an attribute. There's a lot of other attributes that we'll go over later in this video, so don't worry if this all seems like it's a little bit too much for you. The only difference between Magic cards as a whole, because there's about 5 different types of Magic cards, is that creatures have something called the power and toughness, which is down here. So in this case, Runescarred Demon has 6 power and 6 toughness, and those are relevant when you go into combat and start doing damage and stuff like that. So this is the mana cost. This is the cost that you're going to have to pay in order to play this card. And there's different colors of mana, which we'll go over in just a second. Of course, just the name, the rarity, the type of card that it is, and then usually when you play a card, you just do what the card says, and sometimes the card has some flavor text just to add a little bit of flavor to it. So let's move forward. So these are the different colors of Magic: white, blue, black, red, and green. I'm gonna let you guys sort of pause and read through some of this stuff. It's very, very simple. Of course, you're not gonna probably enjoy all the colors at first. It's normal to have only 1 or 2 favorite colors, or maybe 3. Personally, my favorite are blue, and I really enjoy playing blue, as well as black and red. Those are probably my 3 favorite colors to play. This particular color combination is called Grixis, so red, black, and blue, and that's what I like to play in paper Magic, as well as here in Magic 2015. So moving forward, we've got mulligans. So essentially what happens is the beginning of your turn, or beginning of the game, you roll a die to see who goes first. The person who goes first can decide to actually go first, or just to let the other person go first, and you draw 7 cards. So you shuffle up your hand, you draw 7 cards. If you don't like what you see, you can take a mulligan. The only thing that I don't like in Duels 2015 is, as you see here, you get a free mulligan. You do not get a free mulligan in Paper Magic. So I feel like that's my only gripe with the game in terms of teaching new players how to play Magic properly. You do not get a free mulligan. The only time you would get a free mulligan is if you're playing something like a more casual format such as EDH, Commander, where basically your play group, or the guys that you play with, are cool with you doing that. But besides that, in regular Magic rules, you are not allowed to have a free mulligan, and each time that you ditch your hand to basically draw a new hand, because your last hand wasn't good enough, and maybe it wasn't balanced enough, so maybe you get something like this, where it's just a bunch of land cards, which are your resource cards that you need to cast all your different spells and abilities. You get, so many of these, but only one card to cast. This is the kind of case that you would say, okay, I'm going to send back my entire hand and draw a new hand. And each time you draw a new hand, you draw just 1 fewer cards. So if you take a mulligan, you're going to be drawing 6 cards instead of 7. If you decide to take another mulligan, you'll be drawing 5 cards instead of 6. So you just go down 1 for each mulligan that you take, although it's inadvisable to really go anywhere below 5. 5 is already somewhat disadvantageous to you, but you do what you have to do. So. And just a quick explanation of these land cards. As you saw back here, there's 5 different colors in Magic. Well, there's 5 different land colors. These are called basic lands, but there's also other more advanced lands that produce both 2 different colors, like for example green and black, or different color combinations such as that. So you need these cards to cast your other cards. And the mana cost, as you see here, let me see if I can back up here. The mana cost is indicative of how many lands you have to tap or turn sideways in order to pay for that cost. So what happens is you can play only 1 land per turn, and once you play your land, you're able to tap it, and as you tap it or turn it sideways, you're indicating that you've used that now for your turn as a resource to pay for your card that you want to cast. So for example, this one has 2 black mana symbols in it and 5, just a colorless number 5 there. The colorless number 5 here just basically means that you can use mana of any color to pay for this 5, but 2 in addition to the 5 have to be black. So you would turn 2 of your swamps, which is your black mana, sideways, excuse me, and then you would turn sideways 5 mana of any other color in order to be able to cast this card. And then what happens is you go through certain phases in your turn, which I'll explain a little bit later, and then on your next turn you untap everything. So at the beginning of your next turn you untap all of your creatures, anything else that would have been tapped or turned sideways. That's the term that we use in Magic. We call it tapped. It means it's been used, or it's had its ability activated or something of that nature. So once things become tapped, they don't usually untap until an ability untaps them, or more often than not at the beginning of your next turn. So moving on. Casting spells, pretty easy. There's different kinds of spells. So creatures, enchantments, and artifacts are all called permanents. And the reason why they're called permanents is because they stay in play. So whenever you play a card of this nature, whether it's an enchantment, a creature, or an artifact, it's called a permanent because it stays in play unless it dies if it's a creature, or it gets removed somehow if it's an enchantment or an artifact by, let's say, another spell. Then there's cards called instants and sorceries, and those are all spells that basically you just do what the card says. So in this case we have something called Naturalize. It's an instant, and it says destroy target artifact or enchantment. So in order to play this card, you would tap or turn sideways 1 land that gives you green mana and 1 land of any other color that you would like, and then you're able to play this card. Once this card resolves, you're going to be able to do what the card says. In this case, destroy a target artifact or enchantment. And once you've done what the card says, your card then goes to your discard pile called your graveyard. So very, very easy. The only difference between instants and sorceries is that instants you can play any time that you can afford to play them. Sorceries, you can play them anytime that it's your turn and you're on one of your 2 main phases, which again I'll explain a little bit later once we get into the turn structure. But sorceries you can only play during your turn. Instants you can play anytime, really. You can even play them in response to other spells that your opponents cast. This is just the in-game help system here. You can pause to read this. I'm not going to go over this. But if you're playing Duels 2015, and if you're very, very new to Magic altogether, there's a help system here, in addition to all the stuff you can read that will help you play the cards correctly. So casting spells, instance, like I said, there's spells that can be cast anytime, including in response to your opponent's actions. If an opponent tries to destroy your creature with a spell, stop the timer to give yourself enough time to cast an instant spell, such as unsummon, to save your creature. So this is applicable in Paper Magic as well, because if somebody says something like, oh hey, I'm going to cast this spell and destroy your guy, you can say, okay, hold on, in response to that. And then as long as it's an instant, you're able to actually cast it on his turn in response to what he's doing. So it sounds a little bit complicated, but really you'll get the hang of it, don't worry. So more on casting spells. Sorceries are just like instants, except you can only cast them during your main phase. This says main phase, but there are 2 main phases in your turn. So the way that your turn structure goes is you untap everything that you have. Then you have something called the upkeep phase, which certain cards may say something like, during your upkeep do this. So that's the phase that you would do what the card says for your upkeep. After your upkeep, you have your draw step. So untap, upkeep, draw. So on each turn, you draw a card, except for if you're the first person to go. If you're starting the game, you don't draw in that case. But every other turn after that, you would draw a card at the beginning of your turn. And then once you draw your card, you go into something called your main phase, which you can use to cast different spells, as long as you can afford to cast them with the mana that you have available. And then you go into combat. And once you're in combat, you declare your attackers, just to keep it very simplified. Then your opponent has the chance to declare blockers, so you're not attacking your opponent's creatures, you're attacking your opponent or the planeswalkers he controls directly. And then your opponent is able to choose blockers, and then damage happens simultaneously. And then as soon as that's done, you go into a second main phase. And at the end of the main phase, your second main phase, you basically start to get into the beginning of the end of your turn. And at that point, you have to go to cleanup, which is basically just discarding any cards until you have only 7 cards in your hand. So by the end of your turn, you're only allowed to have as many cards as you drew at the beginning of the game, which is 7 cards. So I want to explain to you something called the stack. The stack is basically an imaginary stack that all spells and abilities go on, or at least most of them anyway, as they're cast. So a spell, as you cast it, doesn't necessarily resolve right away. It doesn't happen right away. What ends up happening is it goes on something called the stack, and in response to that, people can actually cast other spells. So let's say that we have a creature here. Okay, so this creature is in play, and we can tell it's a creature because it says creature here, and it's got a power and toughness. And then we have a card called Shock. So let's say I have this creature in play, and my opponent plays Shock, and he wants to do 2 damage to this creature, killing it. So what happens is, in response to his Shock, while it's still on the stack, I place my spell called Cancel on the stack as well, which says counter target spell. So what happens then is the stack resolves 1 card at a time, from the topmost card all the way to the bottom, which means that Cancel would resolve first, targeting Shock, and because Shock is now counterspelled, it's pretty much ineffective at being able to resolve, and then cannot target my creature. So hopefully that makes sense. My opponent casts Shock. In response, I cast Cancel. Cancel gets rid of Shock. Shock then therefore cannot do any damage to my creature. So a lot of different spells and abilities in Magic work this way. They use something called the stack. Feel free just to read through this as well, just to get more clarification on it. There's a lot of Magic rules online and stuff. You don't have to worry about the stack too much in Magic 2015. But once you start playing Paper Magic, especially a little bit more competitively, you'll start to use the stack more often, and you'll be using terms such as in response to, or while this is happening, I'm going to do something else. So you can always respond, and even after a few of these spells have started resolving one after the other on the stack, you can still respond to whatever spell is next, and you can say, okay, I'm going to place another ability on the stack, or I'm going to place another spell on the stack, and then as soon as you're done placing stuff on the stack, once again, it just starts to resolve from the top card all the way to the bottom card in the order in which it was placed, or well, in reverse order, because the card on the bottom was cast first, but it resolves last. So hopefully that makes sense. Equipment is basically sort of like an enchantment, but basically you can enchant your creature and it's something that they're carrying, such as a sword or an axe or something like that. So usually an equipment card is in the form of an artifact. So as you can see here, the main type of card this is, it's an artifact, which is making it a permanent, because once you play it, it stays in play. And equipment cards are interesting because you don't put them directly on the creature. What ends up happening is you pay their mana cost first, so in this case it's 3 mana of any color, and now this card is in play. And then you can use its ability to equip a creature, and the equip cost is 3, so you have to pay another 3 mana of any color in order to put this card onto a creature. And when the card is on the creature, you follow what the card says. So it says that the creature gets +3/+0, and this is a 2/2, so 2 + 3 makes it a 5/2 once it's equipped. So hopefully that explains that. So let's just go back quickly, and we're going to go over the combat basics. When you go into combat, the first thing you want to do is you want to declare attackers, and again, you attack directly at your enemy. Just in really like in anything else in Magic, when you're using an ability or you're using something is happening, there's some action with the card, typically there's the tapping motion, and the tapping motion is simply just turning it sideways, such as this. So when you declare your attackers, you just tap them sideways like this, and then you just say, okay, those are my attackers, and then your opponent has the chance to block. While you're blocking, however, you don't need to tap. So you can just block as it is, and unfortunately if your creatures are tapped, they cannot block. So this is sort of a strategic thing here, where, you know, if you have 3 or 4 creatures on the board, your opponent has a few creatures, you really have to figure out which ones do I attack, or like which ones do I attack with, which ones do I leave back for blocking. And essentially what happens is, like I said, each creature has a power and a toughness, and if someone decides to block while you're attacking them, basically the creature that's being blocked and the creature that is being attacked, that is blocking the attacking creature, they're going to do damage to each other at the same time. And the amount of damage that's done is in respect to the power and the toughness of the creature. The toughness, of course, being the health. So what happens is, let's say this 3/5 goes up against this 2/2. Unfortunately, the 2/2 is going to die because it's going to have 3 damage assigned to it, but it only has 2 toughness. And the 3/5 is going to be alive because it only took 2 damage, so it still has 3 life left. And at the end of the turn, all of these life totals, they just reset back to whatever is printed on the card. Sorry, guys. So this is the blocking here. Basically, if this particular planeswalker here is going to attack me, or this player is going to attack me, I can block, and then this is what would happen if I blocked. Basically, this 2 damage would be done to this, but because this has 4 health, we don't actually take any damage. This just goes down to 2 health, and at the end of the turn, again, it bounces back up to 4 health. So, very, very easy. You can block with multiple creatures, which is really nice too. So if you want to kill one big fatty, let's say there's a 3/3 there, and you have a 2/2 and another 2/2, essentially the damage is going to be assigned to your 2 creatures based on the attack of this other creature here. So both of your creatures would not die. The first one would still die if you blocked with 2 2/2s against a 3/3. But basically, you see there's 2 damage done to this one, and finally 1 more damage done to that one. So your second creature wouldn't die. And the cool thing is that once you decide to block, your opponent actually has the choice of which creature is blocked first, which can be relevant in destroying certain creatures that are problematic. So you just have to be very careful when you block with 2 creatures. And of course this 3/3 here in this particular situation would die because it has 2 damage assigned to it first, which turns it into a 3/1, and then of course this 2/2 would deal another 2 damage to it, taking it to -1 health or -1 toughness. So that would result in this creature and this creature dying and this creature staying alive. So there were some attributes that I was talking about beforehand, namely flying, and this is sort of going to explain that a little bit. Flying is basically an attribute. When a creature has flying, it cannot be blocked except for another creature with flying or a creature with reach. So a creature like this would not be able to block a creature like that. However, a creature like this with this symbol, with flying, or with this symbol, with reach, or in paper Magic, it usually just says the word here. There's no symbols. The symbols are only in Magic 2015. But either of these cards would be able to block a flyer. Anything without flying or reach can't block a flyer. So activated abilities are very, very similar to that of instants and sorceries. Usually they're just pretty much instants and sorceries put onto a card. In this case we have Jade Mage, which is a 2 mana cost for a 2/1. And the activated ability here is 2 colorless and 1 green to put a 1/1 green sapling creature token onto the battlefield. Now I can't stress this enough because this is going to be very confusing, but as you can see, there's no other symbols here other than the mana symbols. This means that you can do this as many times as you like. However, this is going on to trample now. However, if you see a little tiny symbol, and I wish I could show this to you. I'm not sure if it's in any of these slides here, but if you see a little symbol with an arrow going in this direction, like this, sort of like a half circle and like an arrow pointing this way, it means tap. That's the meaning to say that you have to turn the card sideways and pay whatever the mana cost is here in order to activate that ability. So in that case, you need to turn the card sideways and tap it, which means it wouldn't be able to attack, but you can still use its ability. The problem with that is you can only use it once per turn unless you have another way to untap that particular permanent. So in this case, there's no tap symbol, so it means we can pay this as many times as we can afford to activate this ability. So if a creature has trample, which is pretty much one of those other effects that a creature can have, it deals enough damage to destroy each creature blocking it. The remaining damage is dealt to the defending player. So let's say we attack with a 5/3 and he blocks with a 2/2. The creature gets destroyed and then another 3 damage tramples over into our enemy. So that one's pretty simple. Some other things that you're going to see pretty often are First Strike and Double Strike. First Strike essentially just does its damage before combat. So if I was attacking with this 2/2 First Strike here and somebody blocked with a 2/2, their 2/2 would die before it had a chance to deal damage to us because we have First Strike. Similarly with Double Strike, the damage gets done once prior to combat and then once during combat. So it actually hits twice. And then you can read the descriptions here as well. Then we have Lifelink, which essentially just gains you life depending on the power of the creature and how much damage it has done to your opponent or to another creature. Death Touch, basically no matter how much damage you do, as long as your creature has Death Touch, just 1 damage is enough to kill any creature that is blocked by it. So let's say that this guy is attacking and we're going to block with our Death Touch guy. We don't have enough power to kill it normally, but considering that we have Death Touch, it would die. Even if this was a 20/20 and we blocked with a Death Touch, his 20/20 would die because we have Death Touch. So that's a really important mechanic that shows up quite a bit. Protection is another mechanic that's been showing up quite a bit, especially in Paper Magic. And protection basically just means that you have protection from that particular color. That color being the color of any Magic cards that are that have that mana symbol in it. So in this case, these cards are white, and Stormbreath Dragon here has protection from white. So that means that white creatures cannot damage it by blocking it or by basically interacting with it in any way. White spells cannot target it. And then white enchantments cannot target it and enchant it either. So it's completely protected from white, and that includes any white spells that you might have, so be very careful with that as well. Regenerate is something else that comes up quite often, and as you'll see in the next couple slides, there are a ton of these different effects to learn. You'll get them over time. Honestly, if you just play Magic regularly, it seems very, very confusing at first, but you'll get it. It's really not that difficult, and over time you just learn everything. Regenerate is basically like a little bubble to protect your creature from dying once for the turn, and usually it's in the form of an ability, such as here we can pay 1 black to regenerate it, so we have to do that before it would die, and then it would just not die that one time. So that's pretty cool. And this is, as I mentioned, the list of most of the effects, which is quite a lot. The only thing is I feel like this should have been named something different. This should have been named Infect and not Poison. But I'm sure that you'll get to learn about all of these different things. There's not a lot of Poison or Infect in Magic 2015 anyway, so you don't have to worry too much about that. But any of these symbols on the cards in Magic 2015, all you need to do is just put your mouse over it, and it will explain it. As well, if you have any cards selected, as I will show you a little bit later in a gameplay demonstration, you can press the F1 key, and it will explain everything that's on the card for you. One of the cool things, there's some more. One of the cool things of Magic. So, building a deck, this part I'm not really going to go over, just because it's something that you should just do later on. In the beginning, you're not going to be building a deck anyway. You're going to be playing with a pre-constructed deck. But this is just something that you should definitely read. It's definitely very informative. And it will help you in Paper Magic as well, basically being able to distribute your land and your creatures and your spells effectively, and to stay on your mana curve, just to have a good efficient deck. So make sure to go ahead and go over that. And now, let's load up one of our decks. Very easy deck here. Let's see, what can we play? Let's play Goblins Galore. So we're going to go ahead and equip this deck. This is a mono red deck, mono of course meaning just one color, and we're running red. So red is usually a very aggressive color, likes to win very fast. So let's just do a quick gameplay demonstration of that, and I'll explain some stuff as we play, okay? So stay tuned for that. Alright, so we're actually going to be playing a multiplayer game here, and it's going to give me a great opportunity to explain everything to you. So here we go at the beginning of the game, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've drawn 7 cards. And the first thing that you want to look at is make sure that you have at least a few land cards and at least a few cards that you can cast on the first couple of turns. So we have a turn 1 drop, another turn 1 drop, a turn 2 drop, and a turn 3 drop. So that's pretty cool. We're going to keep that. And our opponent's going to take the first turn. So he's going to basically just play a land. And you can only play 1 land card per turn. So keep that in mind. So we're going to play our land card. And let's see here, Goblin Bushwhacker enters the battlefield. If it was kicked, creatures you control get +1. Okay, so we're going to play this first. This is a Goblin Arsonist. It's a 1/1. When he dies, we get to assign 1 damage to target creature or player, and it costs 1 mana. So by doing this, we're basically tapping our 1 land, and we're paying the 1 mana cost here. Whoops. There we go. So now this land is tapped, and it cannot be used for the rest of the turn, and because we have nothing else to do, we're just going to pass our turn. And as you see here, this creature actually has a little glowing thing around it. This is effective in Paper Magic as well. It's called Summoning Sickness. So whenever you summon a creature, whenever you play a creature for the first time, for that turn he cannot attack. He can still block, but he cannot attack for the first turn. And this applies to all creatures that are played except for ones that have a condition called Haste, in which case you're able to pretty much attack right away or tap him if he has an ability. So we untapped everything as you saw here. We just drew a card at the beginning of our turn. We untapped everything. Now we're going to play another land card. And what I'm going to do is, before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my combat step. So moving from my first main phase to combat, and we're going to tap our creature to attack our opponent here, and we're going to declare our attacks. And because our opponent doesn't have any creatures, he can't declare any blockers, so he has to take the 1 damage, which is what he does. And on second main phase, we're going to play this card here, which is a sorcery. So like I said, you can only play it during your main phases. And it's called Krenko's Command. So we're going to pay 1 colorless and 1 red. Both of our mana is red though, so it's okay. And it'll give us 2 1/1 goblins. And this is important to note because these are something called tokens. Tokens are usually made by abilities or spells. And once these are gone from the battlefield, they're gone for good. They don't go into your graveyard like regular creatures do. They just die. So there are some abilities in the game, for instance, that say return target creature to your hand. When that happens to a token, the token just dies because you can't have a token in your hand. So he's going to play a dual land here, as he played last turn. And dual lands, most of the basic ones, especially the guild gates, come in tapped, but they tap for either one color or the other. So in this case, he's got one that's blue-red, and he's got one that's blue-green. And it appears like he's playing a slightly slower deck, so he can't do anything quite yet. So we untap everything once again at the beginning of our turn. We're going to play another land. And finally we have the opportunity to play something bigger, a little bit more exciting. So what we can do is we can play our Goblin Rabblemaster. So he's a 2/2 for 3 mana. Again, one of them has to be red, the other 2 can be whatever color we want. And other goblin creatures that we control have to attack each turn. But he makes a goblin creature on our combat step, a 1/1 goblin token creature. And whenever he attacks as well, he gets +1/+0 for each other attacking goblins. So we're going to go ahead and play that because it benefits our combat. And in this case, he might actually have a response. So he's got something called Nullify. So now this is the example of the stack being used. My ability, my creature has been played, and he responded to the creature with Nullify, which counters target creature or aura spell. So there's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. And now we're going to move into combat. We're going to attack with everything. And once again, because he has no creatures to block, he can't declare any blockers, and he'll be taking another 3 damage. So that'll bring him down to 16. And then we just pass the turn. So he's going to play another land, and he's going to play a creature. So he'll actually have something to block with. This particular creature has first strike. So if we attack and he decides to block, essentially what's going to happen is he's going to kill one of our creatures. So the way we're going to deal with that is we're going to play another land first. And we just drew a card called Shock, which is actually the perfect example, the perfect card that I was hoping to draw. For 1 red mana, we get to do 2 damage to target creature. Now this is an instant spell, so I'd usually be able to do it at any time, but because I want to get it out of the way so I don't have to worry about blockers, especially losing one of my guys, we're going to play it right now. We're going to choose to do the 2 damage to creatures, and we're going to target his guy. He doesn't have any responses, so his creature dies, and we get to move into combat without any problems. But we also have this guy. If we play him for an additional 1, we get to use his kicker ability, which basically gives all of our other guys haste and +1/+0. So that's going to be definitely relevant. And we've got more than enough mana to play that. So now all of our guys will get +1/+0 as well as haste, and we'll be able to swing in for a lot of damage. 8 damage in total. And that'll bring him down to 8 health. And then we'll just pass the turn. Raid Bombardment is going to be fantastic to play, as it's going to do quite a lot of damage next turn. Unfortunately, he's got a 3/1 haster here, so we're going to take 3 damage. And then pass the turn. So before combat, we're going to play Raid Bombardment. So whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less attacks, Raid Bombardment deals 1 damage to defending player. Pretty easy. And this is an enchantment, remember, so this is called a permanent, and it's going to stay in play unless it's counterspelled as we play it, which doesn't look like it's the case, or unless he removes it somehow. And now we're going to go to combat, and we're going to attack with all 4 of our guys. So for each of our guys, he's going to be taking 1 damage. And then the final 4 damage we just do with our creatures, and we just win the game. So guys, hopefully that's been very helpful for you to understand how Magic works. Obviously, this is not the end-all be-all of all guides to show you how to play Magic like a pro, but at least it's going to get you down the right path and get you playing Magic. There's a really great Magic community. Most of the people that play Magic are really cool guys or girls, and I'm sure there's a Magic store near you somewhere, so you can actually go on wizards.com and you can find a Magic store near you. I guess my recommendation would be first to get familiar with Magic and Magic 2015. There's a great tutorial in this game. It's only $10 on Steam. You really can't go wrong. There's a lot of great things you can read. For example, like we were over here just a second ago before our game. You just go to Help and Options, and there's the basics of playing Magic, combat, building a deck. It's all here for you. And there's also a lot of great resources online. The Magic community, once you make it into a Magic store, is fantastic for the most part. Most guys will be more than happy to sit down with you, help you build a deck, or at least help you to decide which direction you want to go in. I guess the only other recommendation I would have is do not buy packs. Do not buy booster packs. Booster packs basically are packs of 15 cards, semi-randomized. You get a bunch of commons, 3 uncommons, and at least 1 rare or mythic rare. But the thing is, you're playing the lottery, so it's very exciting at first, and as a new player I bought a lot of packs myself. Booster packs, fat packs, they're really not worth it. You don't get a lot of bang for your buck. The one thing that I would recommend you buy at the beginning is the Deck Builder's Toolkit, just because honestly it's only $20, and for the most part you're going to be getting a lot of the basics that you're going to need. A bunch of land, a bunch of semi-randomized cards, and 4 booster packs. That's a good place to start because it's predictable in what you're getting, and the value for the money is actually not too bad. Boosters alone I wouldn't really recommend, just because it's completely randomized. You don't know what you're going to be getting. You could get a rare that's worth 50 cents. You could get a mythic rare that's worth, $50. So yeah, you're playing the lottery there. But as a new player, again, what I would recommend is definitely pick yourself up a pre-constructed deck. You can start with an intro pack, which is basically like a $10 to $15 deck. It's already built for you. There's a bunch of different colors available in all the latest formats, and it comes with 2 booster packs. You can actually crack them open, improve the deck a little bit. You start to feel more familiar with building a deck. Once you're a little bit more familiar with some of the cards, or you have a friend that plays Magic, I would recommend getting the Deck Builder's Toolkit, which is available probably at any Magic shop now. It's about 20 bucks. Like I said, the value for the money is good, but do not buy any other packs. And if you really enjoy the game and you want to play more, I would strongly recommend getting into either the Commander game format or into Modern. I would really not recommend Standard. At least I wouldn't recommend playing Standard for any more than 1 season, just because it's extremely expensive. Every so often the cards pretty much rotate out and they're not legal for tournament play anymore, which means you have to ditch your cards, you have to buy new cards, you have to build new decks. It just gets extremely repetitive and monotonous, and you know, it's good for some people but not for others. For me personally, I've taken to playing EDH, which is a 100 card format instead of a 60 card format, because generally in constructed formats you have a 60 card minimum deck size, which you should always stay at 60 cards, because it becomes a lot harder to play the cards that you like if you have any more than that. But basically, you build a deck out of 60 cards. You can't have any more than 4 of one kind of card, or one card in your deck. So you can't have, let's say, more of 4 naturalizes, which is one of the cards that we saw earlier. So you can have only 4, maximum of 4. You don't have to have 4. You can have 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's up to you, but no more than 4 of each card, except for basic lands. EDH and Commander, same thing. It's very different in the sense that you have a 100 card deck and you can only have 1 card, 1 of each card basically in your deck. But it's a lot of fun. A lot of crazy things happen, and you can use older cards from Magic's history that are not available to play in Standard. And you know what? The cool thing is, once you build the deck, you don't need anything else. You just play your deck, you have a lot of fun, and there's no rotation to worry about, anything like that. Likewise in Modern, it's a 60 card format again, with not having any more than 4 cards, 4 of each card in your deck. It's a little expensive to get into. You can probably get a red deck to start off with for around $300-400. I know that seems like a lot, but trust me, in just 3 months of playing Standard Magic, you're probably going to spend as much, if not more, and then you will continue to spend more money, basically trying to keep up with all the new cards coming out. So let me know how your journey into Magic is going. I'm really curious if this video has actually helped you out. If it has, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. You're helping me out big time here. I'm doing this for you guys, so hopefully you enjoy it. Let me know how your Magic career is going. Maybe you've been playing for a little while and you've made it to some tournaments. I'm really curious to see how you're doing. So without further ado, I think I am going to end this video, because there's quite a lot of stuff that I've mentioned. If there's anything that I missed, make sure to let me know in the comment section below. If you have any of your own tips, you've been playing Magic for a while and you want to help the new guys out, definitely leave some tips in the comment section below as well. And I'm going to see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.